Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. In two articles published earlier this week, my guest today sharply criticized the Chief Justice of India, Justice Chandrachud, both for his understanding of Mahatma Gandhi and for visiting Hindu temples in saffron robes in the present political climate. Joining me now to explain his view and, more importantly, to explain why he felt this critique was necessary is the author, the well-known and highly regarded biographer of Mahatma Gandhi, the historian and political commentator Ramachandra Guha. Ram Guha, in recent articles for The Scroll and The Telegraph, you've criticized Chief Justice Chandrachud both for his interpretation and understanding of Mahatma Gandhi and also for visiting Hindu temples in saffron robes at this particular point of time. I want to discuss both of these with you today. Let's start with what the Chief Justice said to the Indian Express about Gandhi. I'm quoting, he said that he had started visiting various states inspired by the life and ideals of Mahatma Gandhi to understand the challenges facing the judiciary and to identify solutions. This prompted you to ask the question, and again I'm quoting, what would Gandhi have thought of a serving Chief Justice making public visits to temples and getting himself photographed and giving interviews about it in the process? Why don't you start by answering that question for me? After all, few people understand the Mahatma and his thinking better than you do.
So, Karan, Gandhi saw himself as a Hindu. He was a person of faith. He also wanted to immerse himself in the life of India. So, when the Chief Justice says he's visiting different states inspired by Gandhi, that is welcome. But Gandhi traveled to remote corners to meet obscure people. He did not. When I wrote that article, I saw the photograph. But later on, I saw that there's a video released by ANI, which is a channel, as you know, very close to the current regime. So they would have been in the know of Mr. Chandrachud's visit and wanted to capture it for whatever reasons and display it. So Gandhi would have welcomed the justice traveling around. He would have not opposed his visiting a temple. Gandhi himself never visited temples in adult life, except once when the Madurai Meenakshi temple in Madurai admitted Dalits, which they hadn't done for centuries before. So, as a mark of acknowledging that they're changing, Gandhi went. But to do so publicly, to do so when the attire he was, accompanied by television cameras, and then to give an interview about it. And we'll come to the substance of what he said. So there are two aspects to the Chief Justice's visit. One is the symbolism. 10 days before the inauguration of a mosque in Ayodhya, which is a mark, as I say in my article, not of Hindu piety, but of Hindutva triumphalism, should the Chief Justice be making such visits to really important temples? Should he be doing so? That's the symbolism. But actually, the substance is in some ways more significant because of what he said, and we can talk about what he said about Gandhi, what he said about the Hindu tradition. So, I mean, as I said, I began my article by saying, I'm not an expert of the law. I know something about the law. I've studied the Constitution. I'm a historian of modern India. I'm not ignorant about the law, but I'm not an expert of the law. But I've spent many decades studying the life and legacy of Gandhi. And when the Chief Justice invokes Gandhi in support of what he's doing, I feel obliged to set the record straight.
Now you write, and again I'm quoting you, Gandhi himself virtually never went to a Hindu temple. You add, though Gandhi described himself as a Hindu, his chosen mode of worship was the interfaith meeting held on open ground where Hindus, Muslims, Parsis, Sikhs, Jains, and Christians would pray together with verses of all their scriptures being read. Explain briefly, why did Gandhi prefer open ground interfaith meetings to visiting temples?
So I think partly it was his independence of thinking. He did not want to take orders from a head priest or a Shankaracharya. But more importantly, it was his inclusive attitude towards faith and his capacious understanding of India as a country of people belonging to many faiths. So, I mean, interfaith prayer meeting is a wonderful innovation. I was in the Sabarmati Ashram only last month, the last week of December, and I always go there when I'm in town. I'd gone to give a talk, an academic talk, and in front of Hidayat Kunj, which is where Gandhi stayed, a modest abode where he stayed, is an open ground which then overlooked the river. Now, of course, there are concrete embankments which keep the river from view, which is sad. But he would hold his meeting there. Wherever he traveled, if he went to Bhopal, it would be an open ground. If it would be in Karnataka, it would be an open ground. And of course, famously, he was killed in New Delhi in the lawns of the house on what is now East Chandari Marg, when he was opening an interfaith prayer meeting. So the idea, Gandhi's idea of Hinduism was, I am born a Hindu, I accept my faith. You, for example, his friend C.F. Andrews, is born a Christian, you accept your faith, and through interpersonal conversation, we will improve our faith. We will rid it of discrimination, of inequality, of injustice. And my conversations with you will enable me to become a better Hindu and will enable you to become a better Christian. And as I said, the importance of interfaith harmony to Gandhi's life, going back to his years in South Africa, where though he never entered a temple, several times he held political meetings in mosques of people of all faiths. The idea was that this is not just a Hindu country, it's also for Muslims, it's also for Christians, also for Sikhs. And I think it's one of his most beautiful innovations. And you don't need a grand structure like St. Peter's in Vatican, or a grand temple or a mosque or a synagogue, and you don't need a structure of religious orthodoxy where you have a Shankaracharya or an archbishop or a grand mufti or a chief rabbi telling you what to do. You find your own way to your own god or goddesses. So that was how Gandhi saw faith, and I think it's a very I think it's the kind of faith that is much more suitable to a diverse and multi-religious country like India than grand temples, than dogmatism, than separating your faith from somebody else's faith.
You made a very important point earlier, which I'm underlining for the audience. You said that Gandhi would never have taken television cameras to film him as he visits a temple. He wouldn't have given interviews to talk about it. He would not have publicized it. If he had gone, it would be private, it would be personal. What the Chief Justice did, you suggested, was to tip off ANI to make sure that he was photographed, to make sure that he was seen. And also the Chief Justice then spoke about it at length to the Indian Express. These are things Gandhi would not have done. He would have kept it personal.
One clarification, Karan. Don't put words in my mouth. I did not say the Chief Justice tipped off ANI. Perhaps the temple authorities tipped off ANI because, Chief Justice would have made his program known and he would have told the temple. I don't know who tipped off ANI, but it was done, it was telecast, and there was an interview, and Justice Chandrachud talked about it. Forget Gandhi. In my article, I mentioned, I don't name, a former Chief Justice, whom I happen to admire greatly. He lives in my hometown. He is known as the Bhishma Pitama of the Indian judiciary. He is a deeply devout Hindu. But he would never make his, if he was Chief Justice, he would have never made his faith public in this kind. You don't have to be Gandhi. You need to know the importance of constitutional propriety. I mean, and the Chief of Army Staff should not be doing it, for example, right? Or the head of the Air Force should not be doing it. A Vice Chancellor should not be doing it, of a multi-faith university. So you don't have to be Gandhi to recognize what are certain norms and conventions you must follow when you hold public office. When you're a private citizen, two things. But you're a private citizen, you can do what you want. If Akshay Kumar or Amitabh Bachchan or Sachin Tendulkar want to go in Saffron anywhere and have themselves photographed for their adoring fans, that's fine. With the Prime Minister, it's problematic because he is using it for political goals, but he is there to win elections. For a high constitutional authority like the Chief Justice, it is totally wrong.
Now, you make a further point about how Gandhi would have viewed Chief Justice Chandrachud's visit to the Somnath Temple and the Dwarkadish Temple in Gujarat. You say, and I'm quoting you, Gandhi would certainly not have done it at a time like this. 10 days before the inauguration of the new temple at Ayodhya, in a spectacular ceremony that shall be marked not just so much by Hindu piety, but by Hindutva majoritarianism. In other words, I take it you're saying that the Mahatma would have been very conscious of the implications and of the political meaning of a visit to a temple at this time in saffron robes.
Again, and not just the Mahatma, the devout Hindu former Chief Justice I mentioned, were here to be Chief Justice now, or many other Chief Justices of the past, I don't have to name them, would have recognized the kind of symbol it is sending, that you're endorsing a majoritarian project, you're doing it publicly, visibly, being videographed. I mean, the Chief Justice is an intelligent man. I mean, he's a very highly educated, intelligent man. I mean, he is not. I mean, if Sachin Tendulkar was to do it, you would know that somebody has advised him. He's not thought through all this, right? For example, right now. So I think it's not just about Gandhi. I think anyone holding high constitutional office, there's certain propriety. For example, you will recall that when there was Armed Forces Day several years ago, the chief of, as you observed in Delhi, the chief of our defense staff went with the Adityanath to a temple in Gorakhpur. That was totally wrong. He was in uniform. It was Armed Forces Day. He should have been with his fellow service chiefs and their other serving officers and soldiers and aircraft people and sailors there celebrating Armed Forces Day. So it's because the Chief Justice mentioned Gandhi, I talked about Gandhi, but anyone with any sense of constitutional propriety should not have done this.
Quite right. You were referring to General Rawat. In fact, it was Navy Day when he was Chief of Defense Staff at the time, and General Pranag, in an interview to me, sharply criticized General Rawat for having chosen to go to a temple rather than to be present on Navy Day in Delhi, where as Chief of Defense Staff, he was expected to be. But let me ask you about the Chief Justice. Do you think there's a possibility that he may have been unaware of the political implications of visiting a temple, or unaware of the fact that he was wearing saffron robes, a saffron kurta and a saffron dhoti, and this was giving a political message? Could this, in other words, have happened unintentionally and accidentally?
Well, if we are very kind, we can give him the benefit of the doubt. But if Sachin Tendulkar had done it, I would have said yes. It's possible he was badly advised, he was unaware. If some Mukesh Ambani had done it, I might have said that. But with the Chief Justice, I mean, he's a person of great knowledge, understanding, and absolutely he knew what he was doing and when he was doing it.
Now, you also have been very critical of what the Chief Justice said to the Indian Express about the dhwaj flag that flies over practically all Hindu temples. The Chief Justice said, according to the paper, and I'm quoting, "I was inspired by the dhwaj at Dwarkadish Ji, at Jagannath Puri, which binds all of us together. The dhwaj," the Chief Justice added, "has a special meaning for us. And that meaning applies as a unifying force above all else to lawyers, to judges, to citizens. And that unifying force is our humanity, which is governed by the rule of law and by the Constitution of India." Now, you point out that this interpretation of the dhwaj is actually historically incorrect. You say it's emphatically not the case that the dhwaj has served to bind all of us together in common humanity. You point out that for much of recorded history, Hindu temples grievously discriminated against Dalits, and some still do. The Hindu tradition has discriminated against women, menstruating women in particular, and the Sabarimala temple is a classic example of that. All of this is surely something the Chief Justice must have known when he made that comment about the dhwaj binding all of us together.
Absolutely, he must have known it. Maybe he was taken away by the spiritual experience of going to the temple and he temporarily forgot his understanding of the law, of the history, of Hindu tradition, of the constitution. Let me read out to you, Karan, briefly, a headline in today's Hindu. It says, I'm not sure what you can see it here. Yeah, it says, I'll read it out to you. It's a headline of a temple in Karnataka. Golara Hatti temple issue, Dalits enter premises in presence of police officers. This happened yesterday. And it's a consequence of an incident that happened on 1st January, where in Karnataka, my home state, which is considered to be one of the more progressive states of the Union, in Shivamoga, in the center of the state, north center of the state, a Dalit entered upper caste locality near a temple, and they beat him up and closed the temple. And then the police had to come to reopen it so that every Hindu could worship. Now, what is this? It is Hindu tradition saying Dalits are polluting, Dalits are inferior, we don't want, us Savarnas don't want to be with them. And it is the constitution, as represented by the police officers of Karnataka, who enforce the spirit of equality, which is encoded in the constitution, a spirit of equality that was the result of more than 200 years of social reform work by the likes of Ram Mohan Roy, Savitribai, Jyotiba Phule, Gokhale, Ranade, Ambedkar, Gandhi, etc. And here is a very clear example of the glaring and total contradiction between the orthodox Hindu tradition's practice of discrimination on the lines of caste and the constitution's repudiation of it by affirming a spirit of equality and fraternity. Now, this is a Dalits enter premises in the premise in the presence of police officers, and this happens all over. And the Chief Justice reads the newspapers; he knows these things. And to say this, to spray that flag, which is historically, and not just historically for centuries, even today, as in this temple in Karnataka and many other temples across India, represents discrimination, represents the spirit of oneness, and it's in harmony or in consonance with the constitution. I mean, it's this interpretation that he offered in his interview, which is mistaken, flawed, tendentious, and deeply damaging to our civilizational and constitutional ethos, is actually much more problematic, much more worrisome than is even going in saffron robes with television cameras.
In a sense, it's fortuitous that what happened at that temple in Karnataka on the 1st has happened just now, because it illustrates graphically the point you're making, that the dhwaj cannot be considered to bind all of us together. And in fact, in your articles for the Telegraph and the Scroll, you make that point very, very powerfully when you say, and I'm quoting you, the Chief Justice says he is inspired both by Mahatma Gandhi on the one hand and by the tradition represented by the temples in places like Dwarka and Puri on the other. I would like to remind him that after Gandhi's untouchability campaign, the Shankaracharya of Puri wrote to the Viceroy that allowing Dalits and Savarnas to pray together goes against the dictates of the religion and the conscience of Sanatanis. In other words, the Shankaracharya of Puri, one of the greats of the Hindu faith, is actually quoted by you. Tell the Chief Justice, you're completely wrong in your understanding, equating the dhwaj with the Constitution of India.
Yes, and I also say in my piece, and I explain much greater length in my biography of Gandhi, that apart from the Shankaracharya of Puri writing this personal letter, open letter to the Viceroy, there was a signature campaign by many, collectively signed by many influential priests of the Hindu tradition, urging the British government to declare Gandhi a non-Hindu because he challenged the practice of untouchability. When Gandhi launched his anti-untouchability campaign and went on an all-India march in the winter of 1933-34, 90 years ago, everywhere his march and his meetings and his interfaith prayer meetings were met with black flags by right-wing Hindus who threw feces at him, at his followers, and in Pune in June 1934 even tried to assassinate him because he dared challenge the practice of untouchability, because he said that flag does not even include all Hindus, let alone all Indians. Right. Now, that is the cold and bare and truth. And how could the Chief Justice of India, if, for example, a BJP ideologue, an RSS ideologue, Mohan Bhagwat, even Narendra Modi, was to make such absurd and farcical and fantastical claims, you would know that they're doing it uh, partly out of ignorance, partly about malevolence, because they like to distort the truth and falsify history. But for the Chief Justice of India, a person of such intellectual distinction, of such experience, from the kind of pedigree he comes from, to make this statement that the Hindu tradition, Orthodox Hindu tradition, is equivalent to the Constitution, I mean, it's staggering.
Absolutely. Any other individual, even possibly any other official, could be forgiven. But for the Chief Justice to err in this way is particularly irksome and hurtful.
Because it's about justice. The word justice is in the title of his post. And here you have the denial of justice by the tradition and the affirmation of justice by the Constitution. That's very clear. So, and he would know that.
You make that point very powerfully, but also very simply and bluntly in your articles. You say, and I'm going to quote you, contrary to what the Chief Justice implies, there is a vast gap between the ideals of the Orthodox Hindu tradition and the ideals that undergird our Constitution. For the Chief Justice of India to claim a congruence between the dhwaj flag and the Constitution is tendentious and misleading, to say the least. And you give two very telling examples to illustrate that. You say, first of all, even after the Constitution abolished untouchability, the temples at Badrinath and Puri continued with the practice for decades. Indeed, there are some temples alleged in Uttarakhand that still do even today. And second, you point out that as late as 1988, the Shankaracharya of Puri defended sati and claimed that women and Dalits do not have a right to read and interpret the Vedas. So tell me, in your eyes, how grievously has the Chief Justice erred?
Well, extremely grievously. So, as I say also in my article, Karan, traditions are not unchanging. So, in the Hindu orthodoxy is less wholeheartedly committed to the practice of untouchability than it was 30 or 60 or 90 years ago. And the reason it's changed, modestly but not substantially, is because of the Constitution and because of reformers like Ambedkar and Gandhi. When it comes to the question of gender, the change has been more timid. There are no women priests, for example, unlike some other religious traditions where you can have women priests. In many places, menstruating women are still regarded as polluting. But even the change that has taken place is because of bottom-up social reform movements and the law and the police officers, as in the case of upholding the Constitution, as in this recent case in Karnataka. So, otherwise, if you left the dhwaj as it was, we'd be ruled by the Manusmriti. I don't talk because the Chief Justice mentioned Gandhi. I mentioned Gandhi in my piece, but he knows about Ambedkar, who oversaw the drafting of the Indian Constitution. And he would also know that when Ambedkar was appointed chairperson of the drafting committee, the Hindu Orthodoxy organized dozens of marches. I describe in my book, India After Gandhi, how they said, how could you allow a Dalit to write a document that will override the Manusmriti? So all this is part of recorded recent history. And the Chief Justice knows about it. It's not. So, I mean, the most sympathetic explanation would be he was taken away by the architectural beauty of the place, the grandeur of the place, the courtesy and the hospitality of the priests who welcomed him, and he temporarily lost a leave of his historical and intellectual and judicial and constitutional judgment and made these remarks. That would be as I said, that can happen. I mean, some of us can, this can happen. If you're very emotionally overwrought, you may not be thinking quite straight. But I mean, it really is deeply distressing, and the signal it sends to those who wish for a more peaceful, a more pluralistic, more egalitarian India, in which the Chief Justice is not a partisan of it will never be the partisan of a particular religious faith or a particular interpretation of that faith or of a particular party. I think it's these are all questions for us to think about. I hope the Chief Justice is rethinking what he did and what he.
Ramgua, it may be understandable, it may even be acceptable for ordinary people to be overwrought emotionally by the power of the moment, but that's one quality you expect a Chief Justice to guard against. He is the Chief Justice of India. Emotion and being overwrought by the power of the moment is something you believe and hope and pray he will never succumb to. And in fact, you make that point very powerfully again in your article. You talk about the timing of the Chief Justice's visit to the temples at Somnath and Dwarka, and the fact that he was dressed in a saffron kurta and a saffron dhoti. The ANI video that you referred to earlier made his appearance very clear in those saffron garbs. And you write, a serving Chief Justice making his temple visit so public at this particular juncture in our nation's history raise disturbing questions about his personal judgment. What sort of questions are you alluding to there?
I think I've already explained many of them in my answers to you, Karan. That the manner of his dress, the public, you know, manner of his visit, how it was captured, how it was filmed, how it was put up on Twitter, the interview he then gave, all of that. I mean, I think it would, I think media attention generally is bad for a Chief Justice. Media attention is fine for a politician. It's bad for a general. It's bad for a Chief Justice. It's bad for a civil servant. This, and I think all of this, he should have resisted all of this. He could have gone quietly. As I said, not even Gandhi. Gandhi did not say every Hindu should be in an interfaith prayer meeting. He said, if I would like the Hindu temples to be open to Dalits, and I would urge my fellow Hindus to persuade the management of the temple in their locality to open it to Dalits. And once it is done, please go and worship. I will still not go, but you may go. So I think, but this kind of almost exhibitionist, public exhibitionism of his Hindu faith at a time like this, I think it does raise disturbing questions about his personal judgment.
Let's, before we end, broaden our discussion a little. The Chief Justice of India not only heads the Supreme Court, but for hundreds of millions, he symbolizes the concept of justice and fair play. How much damage has he done to the office he holds and to the court he heads?
So let me say this, Karan, that for the last 10 years, the intellectual, judicial, and moral reputation of the Supreme Court has steadily declined. And I would urge you to read the writings of respected constitutional scholars such as Anuj Bhavania, Gautam Bhatia, Pratap Bhanu Mehta to get a sense of why, and others, as to why this has happened. And this has been done under the tenure of successive Chief Justices. So starts with Deepak Mishra, and then it goes on to Justice Bobde, Justice Gogoi, Justice Ramanna, and Justice Chandrachud. And there may be one or two who had very brief terms in between. But about 5 or 6 Chief Justices, this decline has continued. So Mr. Justice Chandrachud has continued this decline by the kind of judgments he has made, by the kinds of things he has not done. For example, with regard to the bail applications, particularly, and other such things. And with this visit and what he said, he has further eroded the reputation of the Supreme Court. But he is not singularly responsible. And future historians will judge whether, constitutional scholars judge whether it was every one of these 5 Chief Justices between 2014 and 2024 was equally responsible, or some were more responsible. But history will judge this. And international jurisprudence will also judge this. The Indian Supreme Court in the 90s and 2000s was reasonably well respected across the world. It was not regarded as a captive or collaborationist Supreme Court of the kind that are found in totalitarian regimes. Now, I think international assessments of the Indian Supreme Court are not so favorable and not so flattering. And many individuals have contributed to this decline. And I don't want to single out Justice Chandrachud particularly, but he's certainly one of those in the recent past, and through his public activities in this in the last week, has continued this process of steady, but we must hope not irreversible decline of the Supreme Court.
Tell me this, Ram Guha, can the Chief Justice's behavior be forgiven and forgotten? Or do you think it will remain an indelible stain both on his tenure as well as on his record?
Again, I would not like to personalize it, as I said, because the justice did what he did in Gujarat, and because he said what he did, I wrote this piece. But it's part of a longer history, a longer process extending over a decade, in which several chief justices have been complicit in the decline and degradation of the highest court of our land. And future constitutional historians will write about this. And beyond a particular personality, they talk about a collective responsibility of several chief justices, many individual judges, maybe even justices of the high courts who have contributed to this decline, where the court has become, one scholar calls it an executive court. It is even, one may even go so far as to say it is the collaborationist court. The job of the court was to be counter-majoritarian, to protect the rights of the minority against an overbearing majority and the rights of the individual against an oppressive state. And it has failed conspicuously in both these respects. Isolated examples aside, on the whole, it has failed. And it's a product, it has failed consistently over the last decade, with several chief justices under the helm, of whom Justice Chandrachud is only the most recent.
The issue you've raised there is one that should be of great concern to the legal fraternity, to India's lawyers, but also to India's former judges. How surprised are you that absolutely no fraternity, as far as I know, and certainly no former judge, as far as I know, has commented, leave aside, criticized that what the Chief Justice did? How do you view that silence from the legal fraternity?
But I don't think they've been silent in private. You see, Karan, this I read, as I say in my article, I read this report on Sunday morning. I have a column which is carried in the Telegraph and Scroll and several Indian languages, which comes on alternate Saturdays. So this news report came 6 days before my next column. But I thought I must write about it immediately. So I wrote about it that day. So I may be one of the first to react. And I wrote what I did. But the mails I've been getting from lawyers and senior advocates and constitutional scholars from all over India, I shall not name them, but people in Delhi, people in Hyderabad, people in Mumbai, people in Chennai, people in Bengaluru, people overseas, expressing their horror and dismay at what the Chief Justice did and said, and B, expressing their appreciation for my pointing all of this out. Now, they have to appear in court the next week before the Chief Justice. So, some of the people who wrote to me, so I can't say how they can put it. But the legal fraternity, large sections of legal fraternity and senior, well-respected section of legal fraternity are certainly appalled. I can't speak for former judges, but I suspect some of them also would be depressed, dismayed by, as I said, what he said and what he did.
You correctly said that there's the element of exhibitionism in the way the Chief Justice allowed himself to be videoed and photographed and then talked about it. But this, sadly, is not the first time something like this has happened. There was an earlier Chief Justice. I won't name him because I'm not absolutely sure of the name, but there was an earlier Chief Justice, either an immediate predecessor or one or two before that, who allowed himself to be photographed at Tirupati, completely prostrate on the floor in front of the deity. And again, that was a picture that was deliberately taken and deliberately made available to the press. Are you worried? Are you worried that we are beginning to see what some might call the saffronization or the Hindutvatization of our top court, or at least of some of the most important judges who serve in that court?
I'll answer that question, Karan. But first, I'd say something about why people, the legal fraternity particularly, is so dismayed by what the current Chief Justice did. Because the current Chief Justice has not been known to be exhibitionist. He has exudes an air of sobriety, intellectualism, gravitas. He gives many lectures, which now in retrospect seem like sermons on constitutional morality. He has a degree from Harvard. He comes from a distinguished legal family. So most people would not have expected him to be so exhibitionist as the Chief Justice, previous Justice whom we mentioned. But yes, it does worry us. And General Rawat was mentioned. And I think there has been a concern, which some of us have expressed, about the saffronization of the armed forces, which admirably stood against communalism. Well, that's what distinguished the Indian armed forces from the Pakistani armed forces. But it has stepped in, inevitably, partly through the weakness of its top leadership, pressure from the political class, the WhatsApp groups of retired soldiers and officers. So if this was to come now to the judiciary too, the higher judiciary too, it's there among sections of the road judiciary and has been for some time. These are unhappy auguries for the future of our republic. And that's why they have to be called out. That's why they have to be called out, and that's why I wrote what I did.
What about my point? Are you worried that given this is the second time something like this has happened in the last 10 years, that we could be seeing the saffronization or the Hindutvaization either of the court itself or of some very important judges who sit in the court?
So I think it's not just the saffronization. It's the general capitulation. So it's not just a capitulation to a majoritarian religious ideology, but to an authoritarian political system. So when it comes to protecting the rights of the individuals, even on non-religious matters, you will find a timid, acquiescent, as I said, collaborationist judiciary. I hope this changes. I think in the emergency too, with the honorable exception of people like Justice H.R. Khanna, the judiciary was acquiescent and timid. Now it seems to be going, but after the emergency things change, so it could change. I mean, I don't think this is permanent. I think all of us need to be aware of it. Those of us who care about our constitutional, ethos, those who care about the rights of the individuals, those who care about the endangered minorities of different kinds, I think we should be aware about it. We should be vigilant because this is a dangerous threat.
If I've heard you correctly, Ram, and if I haven't, then please correct me, but you're suggesting something that's even more worrying. This is not just saffronization or Hindutvaization. These are signs that our top judiciary is falling under the political influence of the leadership of the day. That could be arguably more worrying.
Absolutely. Large sections of the top judiciary. I won't paint it with a broad brush, but large sections. And dissenting judges or principled and independent judges, if you see the way they're treated, if you see the way, for example, I can tell you, and this is something, if I may just briefly mention, it's important to our viewers. If you look at when judges are nominated to the collegium, what happens? There's a final okay still has to come from the central government, which is really the BJP, which is really Modi and Shah. And I personally know 3 outstanding senior advocates in different parts of the country, one in Delhi, one in Bangalore, one in Ahmedabad, who had their elevation denied because they were seen as independents. And it was denied for so long that they finally withdrew their application. Because after 3 years, I mean, some cases are well known, but others like Saurabh Kripal, but others not so well known. And the nomination of those considered to be soft Hindutva or with RSS links were they fast tracked so that they would become judges and chief justices of high courts and Supreme Courts earlier. So this is what is going on. And I think there's a larger degradation of the Indian judicial system. We used to say in the old days, Karan, I mean, anyone who's appeared in a lower court knows how awful the experience is, how the criminal justice system is totally collapsed in the lower courts, in the district courts. But we used to think the higher judiciary will protect us. Right. And now it's hard to say that anymore.
Tell me, and this is my very last question, given the force of your critique, do you believe the Chief Justice owes the country an explanation for what he did? And if no explanation is forthcoming, would you like to hear words of regret?
No, I don't think he owes anything in public. I don't think he owes anything in public. I hope he considers what people are thinking and saying. I do know that the Chief Justice does read widely. He reads books, he reads essays, he He's a well-read man. I hope he reflects on what is being said about what he did and what he said about the Hindu tradition and its equivalence, presumed equivalence to the constitution, and he reflects upon it. And what kind of self-reflection is very important. I mean, we all make mistakes. Mahatma Gandhi even said, "I made a Himalayan blunder," but then he wished to make amends for it. So let him think about it. I hope the feedback gets to him. I hope he reflects. So nothing public, absolutely not. That would be uncalled for on my part or on anyone's part, and it would be wrong for a high constitutional authority. We should be free to criticize high constitutional authorities. We can say what we want about the president, the vice president, the chief justice, the army chief, of course, the prime minister and chief minister, and so on. But I hope Justice Chandrachud reflects upon this. Maybe his colleagues will tell him, and they discuss it. He's after all first among equals. There are other people whose scholarship and intellect and judgment he would admire, including in his family, including in his friend circle, including among his fellow judges. So absolutely, it would be ridiculous and absurd and totally uncalled for anyone, least of all me, to expect a public explanation. But at least a reflection of why what he did was ill-considered, ill-thought, and indeed regrettable.
Ram Guha, thank you very much for talking to me.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.